It was a cold, dark winter morning as I jogged through my neighborhood's deserted streets before work. My shadow stretched out before me as a singular car approached from the dark. That's when I learned I wasn't alone. I didn't even see the charging dog until it ran into the street directly in front of the car. When I stopped, the dog lay whining and trembling on the curb. I trembled as well, struggling to catch my breath and only able to speak in sobs. I was absolutely useless, flooded with adrenaline and unable to do anything but sputter. While not entirely productive, my reaction to the scene was definitely not out of the ordinary. In crisis situations, humans are notorious for not responding with the logic and rationality we're known for. Today, we're talking about what happens when we face the unthinkable. We'll explore survival psychology, the ways our brain responds in emergencies, and how you can increase your odds of making it to the other side. All to answer our rude question today: would you survive? That's what you're in for today on Impolite Society.
Oh, I just detest rude, unladylike young ladies.
I hope you don't mind me being a tad rude.
I myself am strange and unusual.
Don't be rude.
That is some weird, wild stuff.
Shocking, isn't it?
It's a scandal, but it's provocative.
Please stop making me blush.
Welcome to Impolite Society, the podcast that goes to those dark places that polite conversation dare not tread. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Laura.
Okay, Laura, before we dive in today, I have to ask, do you have any stories where your survival instincts were triggered?
I was thinking about this, and I was thinking of situations that really scared the shit out of me, but none of them really required a lot of action on my part. It was a more like a thing that happened, and it could have turned into a survival situation if things had gone differently. But everything was fine, not because of anything that I did. Like, you know what I mean?
It just worked out.
Yeah, like this crux moment passed without anything terrible happening, and I was left very shaken, and your mind kind of goes through what could have happened, what might have happened, all these different kinds of things. Like, I was in a car accident that was 100% my fault. I did make some like split-second decisions that I'm still not sure was right or wrong, but I made a decision in any case. But
right. And how did you feel in the moment when you're making those decisions?
I have the memory of making the decision. I have no memory of any emotion attached to it. Like, yeah, everything happened kind of so acting. Fucking fast. Yeah.
Right. And that is a very common experience. And then I want to redeem myself a little bit because I have another one too that's not about the dog. The dog was
but what were you supposed to do with the dog? You saw a dog and then you saw a dog got hit. What are you supposed to do differently?
I did that story because I was more so capturing like the emotions. I was literally shaking. I couldn't talk about what happened. And there was really no one's fault because the driver was looking at me, right? Yeah. They were making sure they didn't hit me, the jogger.
Yeah.
And then I also was like, just writing this research, I was like, what would have happened if that car didn't come? Would that dog have attacked me? I didn't think about that for like 15 years. And then I was like, wait a minute. That car might have saved me. I have a guardian angel that sends a car to annihilate any foe that's coming for me. So watch out, world. But in another kind of intense situation, my brain worked a lot better than just going straight to like emotional shutdown. It was in the high school cafeteria. It was like 2 days before the end of the school year. My little bougie ass was about to go on a trip to Europe through the Missouri Ambassadors of Music. So let's just say I had a lot to live for. And we're standing in with friends, and then I hear pop, 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 and a flood of bodies come running down the hallway.
Holy shit. And what year is this?
That's 2008, you know, 2000. Yeah, I think it was 2008. So my brain goes, this is happening. This is happening right now. You need to respond. So I dropped my cupcake. My friends made fun of me for that later. But I was like,
fuck you.
boom, I'm not dying before I go to Europe, before summer break. So I dropped it, and I remember thinking in the moment, that mass is heading towards the main entrance. I don't want to be in the mass. That's where they're going to be targeting their effort. I'm going to run towards the band hall, which I know has a lesser known exit. And I'm going to serpentine my ass as I go so they don't hit me. Because I remember clear as day thinking, who are they going to shoot? The one lone serpentining girl or into the mass of bodies?
Of people.
Right. And I'm running. Luckily, I didn't get too far before it all fizzled out.
It's fireworks.
Somebody had set off fireworks in the stairwell. But I was actually
you,
proud of myself for
Yeah.
how I responded.
Awesome.
Because I, as we'll talk about this arc here, jumped straight into deciding and made some kind of rational decisions.
Yeah. Good for you.
I don't know if I would be that fast today. That young brain sure had a lot more processing power.
Very agile, that old brain.
But I almost think children probably respond better because we have less experience to build off of.
Oh,
and
that makes sense.
our brains still live a little bit more
On the fantasy side?
in the fantasy side, that you think your Hogwarts letter is coming. So, of course, there could be a dragon in your hallway, you know?
Yeah.
Those kind of things. Anyways, that was not even in the notes I wrote. That was just like, I'm going to add that in. And then this kind of got me on a train of thought. That, folks, is what we're talking about today, which is survival, or how our brains respond in crisis situations and how that affects our survival. A lot of today's research is brought to you from a book called The Unthinkable by Amanda Ripley, which I got turned on to this book after my Donner Party fixation from earlier this year. And I wanted to learn about what makes people tick in these extreme situations and why some people can hold it together and other people fall apart.
And I'm so here for this. And as we discussed on a prior Society Chats, I love the show Alone. And it's all about survival, and the psychology of it is 100% why I watch that show. That's more of an endurance game rather than a crisis scenario. But I think that a lot of this has to apply on both sides.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, because some emergencies, some survival situations are over fast, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some are drawn out. Like the one thing I will say, The Unthinkable added a new chapter about the COVID 2019 pandemic. Mm-hmm. And while it was interesting, for me, it was still too soon. I didn't want to hear about it. But she called that a survival event, though it was very slow moving and drawn out.
See, yeah, they don't happen in seconds. They happen over months, years.
And your brain is still trying to process it and make sense of it.
Interesting.
And how it does that is through a process that Amanda, we'll call her Amanda. We're personal. We're on first name basis here. Described in her book as the survival arc, which is comprised of the 3 steps our brain takes through a crisis. And we are going to start with the seconds that immediately follow the event and then move through it in a chronological fashion, the way that makes the most sense. Now, before we dive in, I can hear what you're saying, listeners. Lady, this is not a taboo. I came here to break societal norms, not for some doomsday prepper shit. Like, give me the cake. Give me the poops and the farts. And to that I say, well, looky here, listener. There's actually a pretty big taboo going on behind all of this. This goes beyond the sense of facing our own mortality or acknowledging that we ourselves might be inadequately prepared for these kind of situations, which you are, dear one. You are woefully unprepared, and we will get to that. But beyond that, just imagining the unimaginable or playing out the worst case scenario is actually something that makes us pretty uncomfortable. You want evidence of how even imagining a disaster can be a taboo? Look no further than the heart-wrenching national catastrophe of the Challenger launch and soon followed explosion. Engineers on the project warned NASA that a critical part may be impacted by the chill that morning. However, those concerns never made it anywhere because those involved decided that the possibility was too uncomfortable to consider. Like, they couldn't even wrap their head around that this wasn't going to work after all the time and attention and press that was there. So because of the idea of the mission failing being a taboo, literal lives were lost and thousands of children were scarred across the nation as they watched it on live television.
Yeah, and I think that this worst case scenario thing, it's a taboo. And part of me thinks it's kind of an American thing. Like, it's being a quitter.
We have to be like relentlessly positive and relentlessly like, we can make it work.
Yeah. Like here in America, we only want to manifest our success or something like that. I have no support of that, but that was just my instant gut check of like, that just seems very American.
No, it does. It definitely has that
like
American
privilege,
feel.
inherently privileged. So like nothing bad's going to happen to moi.
Which a lot of the situations that we're going to talk about today too are American focused. So kind of makes sense. So not only does the Challenger tragedy illustrate that facing survival situations head on is taboo, but that taboo in itself might actually be a part of the first stage of the survival arc. And the very first place we begin in the immediate seconds after a catastrophic event is the delay phase, as described in The Unthinkable. So it turns out our gut reaction when the very fabric of the world we live in is challenged is to go, nuh-uh. We refuse to believe that anything bad is actually happening, like you said. And just like those higher ups at NASA couldn't believe about the shuttle.
This feels a bit like the first stage of grief. You just denial. Not happening.
It's so different than what our brains are normally used to that we just can't believe that it's a real life. And if you're high and mighty and think that you're an exception to this rule, think again. The largest study on the behaviors of 9/11 survivors found that over 90% of the people who were in the building delayed their evacuation by up to half an hour. They felt the impact. They smelt the smoke. And still they stayed. They finished tasks, work tasks. They gathered their personal belongings. They packed their briefcase. They emailed their loved ones to let them know that there was like a minor inconvenience in their day. And many simply just did not accept the dire states that they were in, despite the fact that they were in a burning carton hundreds of feet in the air.
This also feels very American. And also these were all people who came in early too. So, they're high achievers.
Yeah.
And so they just sat there and they were doing this corporate culture thing. Can I take some personal time to avoid a terrible flamey death? John really needs these TPS reports. I'm sorry. I don't mean to make light of people, but or this absolutely terrible tragedy or this clear psychological arc that is happening here. But I was also immediately like, fuck it. Office shit. It was immediately my response.
This is aimed more at work culture in America than it is at the individuals in this situation.
Yes, thank you for clarifying.
And I think that it also is seen across all spectrums, so we cannot blame capitalism this time. Unfortunately. Because this isn't just a one-off, right? So an engine fire aboard a Boeing 737 airliner at Manchester Airport in 1985, it resulted in 55 deaths, with the survivors who got off the plane reporting that some passengers literally sat immobile in their seats until overtaken by smoke and toxic fumes. They were paralyzed. They were frozen. They could not accept their reality had shifted so drastically.
So they were on the ground when this happened?
I think so.
Wow. That seems like some prime denial phase for sure. I can't imagine just sitting there, seeing other people running away and just think, I'll be fine. But this made me think of normalcy bias. Like we assume everything that we see is just a part of being normal.
Right. And it's the fact that their brain just can't keep up with the information that's happening around them. It's not that they're like, oh, other people are running. I guess I'll just sit here anyway and wait for my stewardess to bring my Diet Coke. Their brain is like, this isn't happening. This can't be happening. This is so far outside of our experience that they just can't. The brain is lagging. It can't keep up.
It's like a spinning wheel.
Right. It's processing. And that's because our brains are really good at finding and recognizing patterns. That's kind of our bread and butter. That's how we make sense of the world. I mean, we know it as parents of young kids. These tutorial years are all about doing the same shit over and over and over again to understand the rules of the map that we're playing in. The problem with relying on experience is that when suddenly the world shifts, our brains just literally can't keep up. Every day you go to work, things are fine. You get in your car, you don't crash. You ride airplanes, they don't catch on fire. You wake up and live a normal life and you go to bed at the end of the day. The extremes are not part of our realities until they are. And our brain has no experience on which to draw from to navigate these situations. And that's why when we are in them, we try to collect as much information as possible. So in the case of 9/11, This manifested as people in the building finding groups to deliberate with to figure out what to do after initial impact, or folks trying to get information from TVs, the internet. You know, internet news was very young at the time, but it was still there, to the point where people were stopping their descent to get out of the stairwell to go try to learn more about what was happening. So even after they had decided to flee, they were still stopping, being like, wait a minute, I need more information about what's happening now.
Wow. That is very interesting. And I guess I kind of relate to this, like not being in the moment and doing that. But I'm definitely one of those people who kind of like armchair coaches,
right?
You know, this kind of thing. You see it on the internet, and I'm definitely the person that scours and looks for different perspectives or different videos and those kinds of things. Because I remember watching the video of the Trump shooter and looking at these people. I'm like, what the fuck are these people doing? Because there's like shots and then people like go down, but then some of them like pop their heads up after like a few minutes. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, get down, you idiot. And then there were other people. I'm like, oh, those guys, I would be doing what they're doing. I put myself on the ground in these moments and try to navigate that. But the key factor between what's different of what they're doing on the screen and me is the fact that I know what is happening. They have no idea. They are just running around with the immediate things that are in front of their eyeballs. And that is a pretty fucking big puzzle piece to be missing. And so if I'm finding myself here all high and mighty about it, like I really need to check myself of thinking like, yeah, I have hindsight. I know what is happening. I know that this guy on top of the roof is going to start shooting. They don't know that. So I definitely see the need for other people to like get other perspectives and pull together and try to figure things out together, I guess.
No, that's actually a really good point. And even called out in the book that I read specifically is that in hindsight, it's very easy to be like, what were they thinking?
Yeah.
Because we have all the information. They don't. All they saw was Trump rushed off the podium and like maybe they heard somebody say somebody collapsed. They have no idea. They have no idea.
Or they just heard
happening.
pops and they're not really sure. Or they saw that guy climbing on the roof. They don't know for sure he has a gun. You know what I mean? And there's people like, whoa, what is he doing? What is he doing? I'm like, get the fuck out of there, you fucking idiot. I'm like, yeah, because I know he has a gun. They don't know that. You know?
They don't. Mm-mm. And it's interesting because they have like a lot of survivor stories in this book about 9/11 and like kind of their brains, how they process like, what's happening in the stories that they're putting together as they're descending the stairs.
Oh, yeah.
It's just so fascinating. And that's what's especially heartbreaking about 9/11 in particular is that there were people who were in the building above where the impact happened who never knew. They never knew what happened. They died in that building that day. And they had no idea that it was a plane crash, that it was an organized
like they just
attack.
knew fire bomb, like this building is on fire
and I can't go
die.
down the stairs.
Yeah.
It's just, it's tragic. It's part of the tragedy of it.
Yeah.
But information for our species is so important. And as we gather that information in as many of the inefficient ways as we try to, we get that information and we use it to make judgments around risk. Again, our brain isn't always primed for this because 100% of the events that led us to the moment where this happened, we've survived, right? So I mean, if you're going to draw on all of your experiences in a burning building, you're going to try to do the things you did before because that's what got you out of the burning building, right? You're not going to be like,
none, zero.
New strategy, guys. Let me like break out this new idea.
Change things up.
Right. And you see this as especially bad with natural disasters. And it's something we experience ourselves as proud residents of Tornado Alley because when those sirens go off, what do?
Before kids, 100%, I was out on the porch, looking, sitting, enjoying the rain and the smell in the air. But now, because my husband is a safety fanatic, I'm in the fucking basement at 11 p.m.
Yeah. Well, that's probably for the better, right? Because growing up, we heard those sirens all the time. And guess
Outside.
what? We lived, right? And we survived. So why would we think it was serious?
Yeah.
And this exact way of thinking actually caused loss of life in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina because Hurricane Katrina is not the strongest hurricane to hit that area. There was one from the 80s, I believe, 70s or 80s, that was even more intense. So all these old timers survived that hurricane and they thought, I've done it before, I can do it again. The information that they didn't gather in that process, and I mean, who knows this off the top of their head, was that a lot of the wetlands in and around New Orleans were destroyed for development, right? So this affected the places that water could go as the storm surge hit the land. And so this dramatically altered the effects of the hurricane and caused the disaster that we know today from a hurricane that is not even as strong as ones that they've survived in the past. So based on that experience, without the proper information, we saw loss of life where the average person who died during Hurricane Katrina was 69. And of that, almost half of them were 75 or older. So these are the prime people who lived through that previous hurricane, who had that experience and thought, I can do it again.
That is really sad. I did not know that. Their experience actually worked against them in this scenario, as opposed to a newbie that's like, oh shit, there's a hurricane, we got to get out of here. And I just can't think of a better example of the randomness of life and death. You know, you think you've got something all figured out and it's out of your hands, man.
Yeah, experience can only do so much, because something that's worked every time and the one time it doesn't, then you're done. You know, nature is not a
brutal.
Yeah, she's not a fair bitch. That's for sure. And this is also true of all of us who've ridden airplanes, right? So those people who sat on there while it burned because they just can't believe it's happening. People will waste the precious few seconds they have for evacuation trying to do this milling about phase in gathering the information. They'll waste time digging through their carry-on or trying to get their carry-on over the overhead bin.
Oh, fuck that. But I again, normalcy bias. Like, this is what I do. This is
when
the
I
script
get off a
when
plane.
I get off of a plane.
Right. It seems like it's so simple, but in the moment, also, you might not even comprehend how serious it is. You're like, oh, if I'm going to be stuck sitting on the tarmac for 45 minutes or whatever, I want my phone so I can, at least scroll Reddit or whatever. And this led to a really fun fact that I learned about flight attendants and their training. And in these crisis situations, they are trained to yell at you to get you to move. This breaks our pattern of normalcy, right? And that normal behavior that we're used to. And it kind of snaps us out of this denial phase and gets us to act. So that stewardess who is very politely asking you if you would like a beverage will turn into a drill sergeant and they will be screaming. They are trained to swear at you. You need to get the fuck out of here. Like, leave your fucking bags. Because that gets people to move faster. And it gets us to hop our little asses down that inflatable slide efficiently and in enough time to save as many people as possible.
I mean, yeah, that breaking social norms kind of shocks everyone out of your normalcy bias. If you think everything is normal, you're going to act like normal. If your flight attendant is screaming obscenities in your face, you are not in normalcy anymore, and it can kickstart you. But I mean, really, that sounds like good stress relief for people in customer service.
Yeah, they just eventually, hopefully it doesn't take a plane burning for you to have to get some stress out.
Yep.
So while it might take a while, we will eventually, maybe with a not so gentle shove from Sergeant Stewardess, accept that our world has changed. But this doesn't mean we're even close to getting out of the woods, because now that we've accepted that the unthinkable has in fact happened, we need to decide what to do about it. This brings us to our next stage in the survival arc, deliberation. Our world's turned upside down and we have to adapt to function in this new one, or it's game over. Among the biggest challenges you'll find in this moment is your own brain. Once we accept that we're in this survival scenario, you're going to be flooded with fear. And fear does some powerful stuff to our brains, and it's not always super helpful. We become superheroes with learning disabilities, as described by Ripley, the author of The Unthinkable.
Amanda. We're calling her Amanda. We're on a first name basis.
Sorry. Right. So inside our head, our amygdala leaps into action. It floods our body with cortisol and adrenaline. This makes our pulse quicken, pupils dilate, our focus narrows, and energy is released, preparing us to act. The hypothalamus says, whoa, take a break, frontal cortex. I got it from here. I'm running this show.
The amygdala is like, this ain't big brain shit. Hold my beer, fucker.
Yeah.
It's like,
right. We're abandoning the pretenses of modern society, and our body is taking us back to the survival days of savannah. You know, It's like, I got this. I know a threat when I see one. We're going to outrun that lion. Bing, bang, boom. Got it. We don't need your fancy book learning for this stuff. Because at the end of the day, that's the operating software we're running on. And don't get me wrong, this can do some incredible things. Humans in survival mode have demonstrated incredible feats of strength and endurance and stamina, as well as recounted changes in the perception of reality, like talking about time slowing down or certain senses being turned up or turned off entirely.
Like
to help.
pain sensors.
Yeah, like one of the women evacuating the Twin Towers on 9/11, her brain shut out sight. It was just like, you don't need to see what's happening. You just need to go. So she couldn't tell she was walking. Like, obviously her body is responding.
She knew where she was going, but her big brain was not processing the things that she saw. It was all happening base brain.
Yeah, it was like, you do not, or maybe it was hearing. It was one or the other. It was just like, this is unnecessary for getting your ass out of here in this moment. Yeah. So we're throwing it out the window. Yeah. Incredible.
I read once something about adrenaline or cortisol, one of those hormones that makes your brain function faster. So time feels wonky and like it's going on longer. It's like you're processing more thoughts and processing even more visual information, like so many frames per second at these faster speeds. And it makes kind of people see things in slow motion because they're just not used to that many pictures coming at them so fast that it's like a time dilator. It's bizarre.
Well, this is something that I did read about in the book that I didn't have in the notes, but I will throw in. Because while I did experience it, while that dog ran in front of me, and I can still see that image like imprinted in my brain, they did try to study it. So that study found that in those intense moments where people perceived time to be slowing down, they could not read numbers at a faster rate. I don't remember all the entire mechanics of it, but they were like dropping people off a ledge and they were somehow showing them numbers at a faster rate than we could see. And the people, while they said time slowed down for them while doing the fall, they still couldn't read the numbers. So that suggested that the time change perception is in how we're storing the memory as opposed to how we're experiencing it.
Actually,
which is still very fascinating.
Frames per section. Yeah. No, I mean, that is interesting. I agree. So maybe
for
it's
once
not
I
so
have
much...
an answer to something that you've added. Because normally I'm like, I don't know, Laura.
Question. It wasn't a question. Shut up. I was sharing.
No, it wasn't a criticism. I was just saying I have information based on the ideas that you're introducing.
Okay, good.
Which isn't something that happens all the time. All I have to do is read a full book for every topic we cover, and maybe I'll have all the answers. Which, no, I do not. So don't try that again. No, just kidding.
Noted. I'll shut up the rest of the episode.
No, not shut up. No,
I'm messing.
Just saving that listener mail from coming in. Just kidding. Okay, back to the survival. But there's one major disadvantage to our brain's emergency survival procedure, and that is that it cuts off all access to our human command center, the prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain that's responsible for little things like executive function, working memory, and decision making.
It's that big brain shit. We don't need you right now.
The problem is that this makes it exceedingly hard to take in new information to make goal-directed calls about the situations we're in. For example, Bill Garleb was a POW in Japan during World War II, and he was being herded onto a train with a few hundred of his fellow servicemen. While the vast majority fought to be on board first so they could get a chance to sit and actually rest, Bill saw the situation. He took a step back. He looked at the car they were about to get on. He saw it had spotty ventilation, and he thought, I don't know if I would necessarily be pushed in as far as I can. So he let himself be pushed aside and be literally the last person on the train car so that he could have a space by the open door. On that train ride alone, 26 men died of suffocation. Because Bill's prefrontal cortex was somehow functioning in this high-stress situation, he was able to take in new information and make a call that helped him survive while others didn't.
So because his prefrontal cortex was working, he could notice those things that likely nobody else noticed. And I mean, it might have been that they were on a death march, which means that they've been walking for days without food and water. So when you say that they want to sit down, it's not like, first to get on the plane. It's like they're literally like they're dying.
They're exhausted. Yeah. It was the context was that they had been on a train ride like just recently and they were stuck standing. If you weren't on first, you were stuck standing.
Yeah. Oh, got it. Okay.
So they were that was their experience that they were drawing on instead of stopping to take in the new
experience
information.
Once again works against you. Not to say all the time, but in this one, they're like, shit, I don't want to be stuck on this 16-hour train ride in standing room.
Right.
I want to be able to sit
I
down.
would do the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very understandable. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not even the new information that our brain can't quite access. Fear prevents our brain from unlocking the knowledge that we already have. When we're in a crisis situation, our working memory is completely shut down. This can be seen in the phenomenon of no poles in the skydiving world. It is not uncommon at all for an experienced skydiver to plummet straight into the ground after their main parachute fails, even though they have an emergency one on them that's completely functioning. In these cases, they're there. They're ready to go. The cord was just never pulled.
This blows my mind. I have never heard of this before, but it's so common that there's a term for it. No poles. This tells you, I think, everything that you need to know, again, about not being able to access information that you already have.
Right.
That's bonkers.
In a crisis, what a crisis situation does to us. Because a study wanted to understand this better. So they looked at working memory of parachutists by giving them operation span tasks, right? So these are just little tests that involved reading math problems, recalling words, and then recalling the words in order, like those kind of brain games type things. They did it before a jump, after a jump, and then for control, they did it on a non-jump day. They found significant impairments in storage and processing capabilities prior to jumping. Across all skill levels of parachutists, everybody saw a decrease in executive function skills. The only thing that separated the newbies from the veterans was that experienced jumpers regained them faster after getting on the ground. So they're
more used to the high.
Right, yeah. They were still impaired at landing, but they recovered faster. So that adrenaline rush that these jumpers were chasing was the actual thing that was killing them because it shuts down the brain's communication paths that they rely on through training when things don't go to plan. And our poor brains, right? It's only trying to help you, but as we've always said, it's that ancient operating system. And our world has changed so drastically, and our survival scenarios are far more complex than our ancestors could have ever imagined.
That's just like a tagline for the human stress response. Good for charging animals, bad for modern marvels.
Right.
No wonder why we're all so fucking unhappy. We can't even navigate an emergency situation because our brains are fucked. Or rather, our brains are working great. Everything around it is fucked.
Well, yeah, our brains are working in the way they were designed, but they were not designed to deal with plummeting towards the earth at 100 miles an hour or however it works. I don't know. I've never felt called to do it. So how do we pull ourselves out of this fear cycle and make the best decision possible during the deliberation phase? There are 3 factors that are going to either help you or hurt you. The first is your personality. Resilience is the ability to adapt well in the face of adversity, trauma, or stress. And unfortunately, it's not an equal opportunity ability. This can be seen on any war front. One reporter who was present during the Vietnam War recounted that he met cooks who were traumatized by their service, while frontline infantrymen appeared unaffected.
This reminds me of 9/11. You know what I mean? There were people who were in the building and then there were people that were across town, and people dealing with different levels of PTSD and all this different kind of stuff. But also resilience. Well, I'm fucked. Not looking good for Laura.
We all are in the end anyway. So what is the secret to resilience that will let us function in a crisis? Well, there's no one formula, but there are similarities between born survivors.
Is it just pure rage? Because I feel like that can get me pretty far in the sense of just this is supposed to work and it's not working and I will just force it until it does. Was that mentioned at all?
I didn't hear about that. I think rage would be helpful, but I think your brain would have to adapt to focus the rage into a different, instead of trying the same thing over and over again to like creative problem solving. Like, I can't believe this is happening to me. This is not fair. I don't need to die right now. How can I motivate myself to get out of this situation?
Got it.
I think rage can be constructive, but it has to still be adaptable.
It can't just be trying to pound a square peg in a round hole, which is 100% what I would be
it's got to be thinking, I need to pull that other chute, not keep yanking on the one I have.
Yeah. Okay, got it.
So outside of maybe a sizzling, burning rage at all times, those with high resilience seem to have 3 core beliefs. They think that they can influence their lives, they believe they can find meaning regardless of the situation, and that they can learn from good and bad experiences alike. Now, before this sounds a little bit too much like some corporate change management seminar, let's look at what this actually says.
I'm actually very familiar with some of this. That Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. It is a book from a Holocaust survivor. He was a psychologist. It's a game changer. If y'all haven't read it, I definitely recommend it. Good Companion, very short as well. It's more like I struggle to even call it a novella. There's free audiobooks because it's, old as shit. But Good Companion, actually, to this.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, because that kind of optimistic ability is what makes people more resilient, or what they found. But it's about that optimism. It's also about confidence, because those who are confident, like unrealistically confident, like the people you don't really necessarily enjoy being around, the people who are dancing on the edge of delusional, those are the ones who tend to do the best in a crisis. And this is backed up by a study that looked at survivors of the Bosnian Civil War. The respondents that claimed that they saw themselves as like better off or more well-adjusted than those around them, they were the ones that showed lower levels of cortisol overall.
And that actually also tracks with Viktor Frankl in his book. He said in the Holocaust, he said basically the best of us didn't survive. And I believe it, that the tender-hearted, the ones who think more deeply about how their actions, how they affected others, they aren't well suited maybe for this kind of scenario. And I feel that deeply.
I mean, honestly, I feel like I see that play out every day when I worked in corporate America, is the ones who had the most false confidence, the ones who legitimately thought that they were better than other people for like no reason, were the ones that did the best. Yeah. It's kind of like fake it till you make it scenario, because they can walk into a room and not be stressed about whatever X, Y, and Z. And so that kind of rises to the top. It's just interesting.
Ugh. Yeah.
And unfortunate.
Yeah.
But all this is looking at resilience after the fact. We actually have ways to predict who will be better at keeping their head under pressure. And one way gives us an answer to that age-old question: does size matter? No, not that one.
Oh, okay.
But it does matter when it comes to the amygdala, because studies have suggested that the bigger your amygdala, especially in specific parts, the better you might be at handling stress and trauma.
Like at the tip?
Yep. Or
or more like a girth scenario.
It hooks to the left, right? And so that's on the left side specifically is what the study found. The left portion. That's legit. That's the study. Said that the left side can make it better. But don't fear, guys, if you're not rocking a huge amygdala, because other studies, I mean, here's the thing with academic studies. None of it's concrete. None of it's definitive. But other studies suggest that it's less about size and more about motion in the ocean, right? Or how well your amygdala connects and interacts with your prefrontal cortex. So even in tough times when that communication breaks down, the better it is at doing it in the day-to-day, the more odds are you're going to get better outcomes in intense situations. But don't worry. If you don't have time for a brain scan, not a biggie. Researchers have also been able to predict resilience through a questionnaire that centers on dissociation, finding those who dissociate more often in their day-to-day life, ideas of feeling disconnected from their body's life, like they're watching a movie or a play instead of actually experiencing it. Those folks who do that more often are less likely to be resilient, to the point where this questionnaire could be used to reliably predict what soldiers were going to make it through a special forces training program.
Okay, well, this is good for me because I don't feel like I'm very resilient. However, I definitely feel very present. I feel everything that happens to me, and I complain endlessly. So maybe this is a tip in my direction. Also, I'd love to get my hands on that questionnaire.
I know.
Very
it would be interesting to see. It's not all like explicitly like that because I don't dissociate at all. Right? Like there's never really I know I've gotten there before. Watching that dog get hit by the car, it felt like I was watching a movie. But that might have just been because that's the only frame of reference I had for seeing things get hit by a car. It was like Regina George and Mean Girls. Boom. But that's where, that's the only time I can think of it. I mean, maybe I felt it in passing. I get deja vu every once in a while. I wonder if that's
I feel like that's different.
Yeah, who knows?
We're just grasping at straws. It's like we're gonna survive.
If you're like us and worried that your resilience may be lacking outside of your like lack of dissociating, have no fear. Because if you aren't resilient, hopefully you can rely on the resilience of others around you. You know, if you're lucky. Because when it comes down to it, we're social creatures and we die like we live together. The next factor that can help you deliberate is those around you or the group, right? So studies show that when facing a natural disaster, we will confer with at least 4 people or sources before deciding how to respond. That can be with your family, friends, talking to your neighbors, the newscaster, or talking to other people on the internet. This
Reddit.
Yep. I saw so many posts about that recent storm on Reddit. It definitely motivated us to take it more seriously than if it was just on the news. But this could be both helpful and hurtful, right? So when the group goes with the outcomes that can help you survive, that's good. But it doesn't always go that way.
Yeah, it's like a crapshoot.
Right, yeah, it's really at random because we're all operating in those situations with bad information or incomplete information. Mm-hmm. And you can see a fantastic example of this literally in action that we all lived by our responses to the COVID-19 pandemic. So who you deliberated with, those relationships, both real and parasocial, greatly influenced your behavior during that slow burn of a survival event.
Man, I think that whole thing, if psychologists aren't studying that, they really fucking should be. Because you can look at how people reacted, who they interacted with, what like personality types and all these different kinds of things. Like I feel like there's so many factors that we could look at in this. A lot of potential there. I really hope that somebody is studying it somewhere.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they have to be. Otherwise, it's like, what are you doing, folks?
Yeah. Why are you wasting this amazing opportunity?
It definitely felt like you fell into one of 2 funnels, right? And that...
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that's what we can see. The groups can be great when it's urging you to go underground when there's a tornado sirens, right? Like I saw on our town's subreddit that was saying like, guys, this is going to be bad. But it can also lead you astray. No, folks have died in fires because they passed emergency exits to follow the group out the main exit. You're more likely to try to go out the way you came in. So you will pass safer routes to go out the same way you came in.
So you're following the person in front of you. If they're going for the front, you're going for the front, even though there's a direct exit right next to you.
Yeah, you think there's a reason why they're doing it, or you don't even think that. You're just following. Yeah. People will also waste precious time on a burning aircraft trying to reconnect with the rest of their party. Instead of simply evacuating, they will climb over chairs and try to get to others that they know. Because
depends on who it is.
Well, I mean, if it's your kid, you know, you're going to be climbing over chairs. But like, also, everybody could live if you exited smoothly and efficiency. Like, that's the design is to get everybody out. Anyways.
Yeah. The inefficiency is human behavior.
Precisely. And we can't help it. It's how our brains work. And that was the truth for 70% of 9/11 survivors as well, who talked with others before deciding to evacuate. In one story, a career counselor who was there doing like resume reviews and mock interviews spent 30 minutes.
Poor guy.
I know. He was there by himself for his seminar. He was like a facilitator. And he spent 30 minutes with a group of strangers. He didn't know anybody else in the building, like just wandered around until he found people. And then they spent 30 minutes having a little sit-down chat about what they should be doing, to the point where they broke a window to see what was going on outside instead of just going down the stairs. And he said that group even still helped him, because if he was on his own, he never would have gotten out. He would have been stuck in that delay stage. And he said, I would have sat there and waited to die.
Wow.
But the good news here is that most people you meet during a crisis like this are operating in good faith. This is why I don't necessarily buy the whole violent collapse of society narrative that you see in apocalypse movies. But hey, I might just be an optimist, so call me resilient.
I don't know. I think about it both ways a lot of times. It's kind of a coin toss. I think you feel your way through, right? I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. Maybe we could do another episode on it. We can really explore it.
Yeah.
Or maybe a society chat. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, I want those to be more fun. This seems less fun.
Fair. Talking about the violent collapse of society, maybe not so fun. Fair.
But the studies in this context, and maybe those more faster burn ones, these situations, they find that when we're in dangers, strangers are no longer strangers. And this spans all cross groups, identities, social, whatever constructs. Just the fact that you are both there sharing this intense experience means you're bonded. And that bond is strong. There are stories of mining accidents that will show miners following the group, even if the group is making a decision that they don't agree with, right? They would rather die together than do better on their own. In their head, right? We don't really know what the outcomes are, but we know that in that moment they disagreed, but they still went because they didn't want to be alone in the dark.
And that's combat. These people, they're bonded for life in these scenarios because trauma bonding is a thing. And it doesn't just happen after the fact. It happens in the moment.
Right. This idea that sticking together is better for us and that we would rather work together, it seems to be something that's part of our evolutionary biology because it's present in our closest animal relatives as well. When threatened, chimpanzees will employ a very surprising defense mechanism called the cuddle. They will huddle together and stroke and comfort each other. And naturalists theorize this is a display that if you fuck with one of us, you get all of us. Like, look at how close and connected we are. Of course I'll die for my homie here.
Like, look. He's got such soft, luxurious hair.
Well, and then to your point from before, this also could be enforcing those social bonds that are preparing the troops for battle. My harebrained theory, based on the research, because I've been deep in it for the last 24 hours, is that this might be like a soothing tactic to help the apes regulate, to move them from the fear part of the brain to the higher level of thinking so they can make better decisions.
I tracked that. Actually, I thought that before you even were... before I read that part.
Yeah.
That I agree.
Well, cool. That, maybe there's some credence to my crazy ideas. My other idea was that it was just comforting them so if they died, things wouldn't be as bad because that is like human behavior as well. They found an adult cradling a child in Pompeii and the theory was that it was a mother and child. Turns out they were both males and they weren't related. They were just doing what us big apes do in intense situations, which is rely on each other.
Well, and protecting young. That's just who we are as a species, a social species. It doesn't matter who you are, if you're mine or not. You're there. I'm there. As an adult, I feel compelled
to put my arms around
protect.
You. Well, and I think that the studies here are saying that it doesn't even matter if it's a child, If you think you're at the end of all things, you're going to connect with other humans around you. Mm-hmm. That's beautiful.
Yeah. It is.
We've lost the narrative here a little bit as a species sometimes because we're all so safe. Maybe we just need a little bit more danger.
No, I totally agree. I mean, I don't want it to be more dangerous, but I see the cracks and I blame it on that.
Yeah, you need the perspective. If you lose the perspective, you need the danger. It's like a vicious
there you
cycle.
go. Yeah. Let's get the perspective and let's leave the danger where it was.
Correct. So hopefully you have resilience or somebody in your immediate area has it.
Somebody does.
Yeah. But honestly, your best bet in the final factor that can affect your deliberation when facing a survival event, practice. To illustrate this, I just got to tell the story of a man named Rick Rescorla. He is an American hero, god damn it. And not enough people know about him. Though he was born in Cornwall in the United Kingdom, he immigrated to the U.S. and joined the Army and served in the Vietnam conflict. When he came back, he brought his knowledge of warfare eventually to the security profession. He worked for Morgan Stanley, or the firm that Morgan Stanley bought before that were housed out of the World Trade Center. After learning about some vulnerabilities that the building faced, Rick poured tons of time and energy into preparing those under his protection. He did drills, regularly. And they were not optional. He would come and yell at you with a megaphone to get out to like participate. And he actually broke.
Oh, that's so true. Because in corporate America, you hear those drills and you're just like, whatever.
Yeah, you're just like, this is dumb, right? I got stuff that I need to do.
Yeah.
But he broke people out of it, made them participate, and broke the rules because the World Trade Building management didn't want people in the stairs. They said you're not allowed to go to the stairs. For your drills, you just have to gather at the door to your emergency exit. And Rick was like,
because they want to save time and like the whole rigmarole.
It's
like
the building. Because, these are tenants of the property management company that owns the building. So going down the stairs opened you up to more like liability if somebody trips or da-da-da-da. But Rick was like, no, he busted the doors open. He made them march their asses down because he knew they needed the muscle memory. He knew they needed to know where they came out and how to get out of where they came out. And he made them do this regularly. And so when 9/11 happened, Rick and his people were prepared. He and his team personally marched those folks down the stairs. He even sang them Cornish war songs to keep their spirits up and feet moving.
I have never heard of Rick before. And fucking A, Rick. I love you. This is awesome. This corporate drill sergeant that's determined to keep his corporate dummies alive. I love him.
And he did his job, man. In the end, there were around 2,700 employees of Morgan Stanley in the building that day. Of that 2,700, only 13 were lost. And I want to say almost half of that number was Rick and his team because they did not leave until everybody was out. The last time somebody saw Rick, he was going up again to go get some asshole executive who was refusing to evacuate his office. Because that's the kind of person he was, god damn it.
Oh my God, Rick.
American hero.
Kiss to the sky.
Right. I was like, they don't make him like
also,
they used to.
Fuck that fucking executive.
Because
I'm mad about it.
I know. It's this,
why don't you go back for that
Rick,
asshole?
It was not worth it. But anyways, that's just who Rick was.
That's just who Rick was.
Yeah.
Aww.
And there are...
Okay, maybe I'm menstruating or something because this honestly has made me a little emotional.
I cried so many times during this, like reading the book, hearing this. I tried to leave out the worst stuff too, but everybody needs to know Rick's story. I almost left it out to try to cover it in its own episode, but I was like, no, that is not a topic for us, but I'm going to stick it in here. And there are also really good lessons we can learn from his story. One is preparation needs practice. You need to break the physical barrier. You need to do it physically because you can have all those little beautiful plans right there stored in your prefrontal cortex. But when you can't access that, you are up a creek with no paddle. Your brain needs to be able to turn over to that amygdala that can do the thing that you've practiced. Like this could be the stop, drop, and roll, walking your evacuation route from your house, taking the stairs in your hotel so you know where they are if there's a fire. This is also told in a story in the book about a cop who was completely disassociated the first time he actually had to kill somebody in the line of duty. But because his body had practiced it, he was like a top-notch marksman. He was able to complete the task before his brain even comprehended that what the person was pulling out was a gun.
Yeah. It's kind of like that axe murder guy we talked about. So your base brain is acting out what it's done before when the frontal cortex is completely checked out. Like you have to have those muscle memories in there for you to access.
Absolutely correct. Like the rest of it is useless. And that was the biggest thing. If you want to survive, you need practice, but you can't practice for everything. So the second piece here is that Rick prepared for the most likely threats. He brought in a friend from his military days who worked in counterterrorism to help him identify the weaknesses and how a terrorist would attack the World Trade buildings. From that knowledge, or those kind of like guesses, he was able to prepare for those events. So that kind of let him focus in on what he could do to put the effort where it'd make the most bang for your buck. The example she gave in the book, don't go out and buy a gun because you're worried about the zombie apocalypse, because if you take time and slow down and research, you're going to find out that you are way more likely to turn the gun on yourself after a hard time than you are to use it to defend yourself.
Against the zombies.
Against the well, I had to say zombies to make it a little more palatable.
Oh, what did she say?
No, she said zombies, but a lot of people
okay.
buy guns to defend themselves against other humans, and that seems as far-fetched as zombie. Not as far-fetched, but your statistics are still, you're more likely to use the gun on yourself than you are on anybody, or somebody in your immediate family is going to use it on you. That
as not intended.
Statistically, right?
Yeah.
So instead of preparing for the far-fetched situations, think about the situations that are more likely so that you can prepare for those.
Tornado, earthquake, blah, blah, like whatever else.
Exactly. Fires. Fires
This
are
is making me
one.
think that I need to do drills with my family.
That was definitely part of what I got out of this too.
Yeah.
Fun fact,
Yeah.
if you wake up and there's smoke in your room at night, don't stand up. Roll out of bed. How have I never heard this? Roll out of bed. And that's going to be super hard because how do you get out of bed every day? You fucking stand up. So we got to practice rolling, right?
Because if I stand up, I'm going to start coughing?
If you stand up, you get hit with the smoke, you burn your lungs, game over. The heat,
Just from burning?
yeah, the heat can be so high that you stand up, you inhale, and your lungs just get burnt.
Huh.
So stay low. That's the name of the game, man.
I mean,
Stay
I've definitely
low.
heard that before, but again, frontal court. Ugh. Anyway,
Right.
I feel like we're getting off topic.
It's hard not to, right?
Sorry. And with what I was saying about the kids,
Right.
or
you need
what you were saying.
you need to, get them to practice it as well.
Yeah.
And so then the third piece here was that Rick knew how to relate to people and motivate their spirits. Like the singing helped people carry on when they wouldn't. And there was a quote in there too that he told them that they needed to be brave. He says, "We need to be brave because we are Americans." And I was like, yeah, fuck yeah, Eagle sound. Man, I miss those days after 9/11 where we actually were united as a country. That was a bad situation, but that was a unexpected positive outcome.
You're saying safe perspective.
Right. Yeah. Banding together.
Yep.
So now that we've pulled in all the resources we have to deliberate, we've fought our brains, we've milled around in a group, and we've called in our training. The final step is to decide what to do. That is the last step of the arc, is decide. Take action.
What the fuck are you gonna do? And that's the part that everyone thinks about, right? They don't think about the previous steps.
Which you have to get over those to even get to this phase.
Exactly.
And the gut reaction that many people assume will happen in these scenarios is panic. But reality tells us that's not quite the case. But real quick, guys, it's time for Rachel's word nerdery, because haha, you thought you were safe. This time, false. I'm going to teach you about the etymology of a word. And that word is panic. Laura, how do you think of panic?
Ah!
That's it. To behave irrationally, to be spooked, startled, and it's an old word. It comes from the old world, and it's referencing Pan, our favorite little pre-devil who is called a satyr. And when he was not looking for nymphs to harass, Pan would spend his nights creating noises in bushes to scare travelers, causing them to panic. Gosh, I love it. I just think that's so crazy that we have this word that we use without thinking about it. That's based off a mythological feature from Greek mythology, right?
Yeah, Pan, man. Can't get fucking away from him.
Yeah, this devil is literally still haunting us in more than one way, right? By taking the appearance of the literal devil, and he's scaring us to this day. But anyways, I digress. Falling into panic happens way less than people expect. It turns out that when faced with a crisis, most people act as they normally would. They will even stay within the assigned social roles, i.e., if there's a fire in a restaurant, the servers are going to be the ones helping people, escorting them out, while the guest will take more of a passive role. I mean, I encountered this recently. The other night, a couple nights ago, our dog was losing her fucking mind, barking in the middle of the night. Did I wake up? No, my ass jumped out of bed and walked down the stairs calmly to address whatever situation was happening. Was it a well thought out system? No. What was I going to do if someone was breaking into our house? Just walk down there? But I was calm. I wasn't like...
But you're like, I'm the steward of this dumbass dog and I have to
Well, I was more like, I have to see what's going on, right? I have to address the situation, but I was calm while doing it, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't like I was like, creeping down the staircase or like screaming at my husband. I just literally, there was a situation and I went to address it calmly, directly. While some qualified folks will say that panic is outright a myth, that it does not happen at all, that's just, that's not true. Things are never absolutes, right? It certainly still does happen. But there's a specific recipe that is needed, and you need 3 ingredients. 1 is feeling trapped, 2 is lacking control, and 3 is being isolated. And now you can see why airplanes are a lot scarier than driving, right? Because even in these situations, you're stuck on the plane.
You're trapped.
Yeah, the pilot's
You don't know how to fly a plane.
Right? And help is on the ground. It's far away from you. So it makes a lot of sense. But even in these situations, not everyone will panic. But that's kind of the instance where panic does happen. In fact, the myth of panic and trying to avoid it actually hurts a lot more than it helps, because it results in the powers that be not trusting us, the public, to be a partner in responding to a crisis. They'll spend all this money on equipment and insane equipment, but they won't spend the money on educating and preparing the public because they think it's going to make us too scared. It can appear in ways. I think there was a story of an island. The first time anybody heard the warning siren was when an actual tsunami was coming, because they were afraid that putting the siren on for drills would scare people too much. So when they did put it on when they needed to, nobody reacted because they didn't know what it was.
They're like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, they're just like, okay, and then another really famous case of this was recurring President Trump downplaying the COVID pandemic, even though off camera he was admitting to it being a serious situation. That was a quick aside, because that was another kind of like mind-blowing piece of information. But the odds are you're not going to panic, right? That's the smaller portion of the population. So if you're not going to panic, what are you going to do? Well, the vast majority of us will do nothing, right? As we talked about through the delay and the fear, we won't be able to move past it. And no, this isn't quite as maladaptive as you might think. Research into pre-animals has shown that this behavior can be used as like a final defense mechanism into tricking a predator into thinking we might be sick or damaged in a way that could affect their health.
So it's like fight, flight, or freeze.
Precisely.
Because we always say fight or flight. It's like, there's a third option.
Yeah, the freeze, that kind of shut down. So it could be that, or it could be that animals, predators' prey instincts are triggered by movement or flailing, or, and if you just don't do that, they don't see you as that isn't triggered. They don't see you as the chain of reactions.
Yeah. So it's a legit strategy. Like you said, it's not as maladaptive as it sounds.
Again, from the outside, you're like, what are you doing? Why are you freezing there when you just saw somebody get shot in front of you, right? Like the assassination attempt. You're just like, what are you doing? But as our society grew and changed, our biggest predators weren't animals. It became each other, right? Like, who's more likely to kill you? A car. Or not a car. A car
They're after us.
But who's driving the car?
It's Christine. She's after me.
And unfortunately, when the goal is just to kill, like, playing dead isn't as effective as it could be. But it still does help, right? And one story of that is Clay Veneland, who was a student at Virginia Tech during the mass shooting that happened there. He played dead for the majority of the attack. As soon as he saw what was happening, he fell over and just laid still. And not only did he become one of the half of the people in the room to survive, he was the only person in that room to not be shot in any capacity.
I mean, playing dead is a tried and true strategy in horror and other apocalypse films. I mean, especially in these really chaotic and bloody scenarios. I mean, it seems to work for the people in the movies. So good job, Clay.
Right. And not only can it help you when things help you make it through, it can also help you when things go wrong, right? Because it can have other benefits. People who will dissociate when they're experiencing extreme trauma. So it can help make things that are bad, if you are in your last moments, it can maybe make them a little bit more bearable, right? I always used to get that thought watching the nature documentaries about how awful it is for that gazelle in the final moments when it's in the lion's jaws. And then I was like,
it's just like getting its intestines ripped out.
Yeah. And then learning this, I'm like, oh, that gazelle's not there. The brain is protecting it. It's,
Yeah. Good.
Which is kind of a comforting thought in the worst case scenarios. But my greatest defense for freezing is obviously there has to be some evolutionary advantage to it, because it's the response that the vast majority of us have. And we can't all be accidents. And finally, if you want to go above and beyond, you can be a hero, a choice that is neither rational nor logical or has any evolutionary benefit to it at all. So what's the deal with this heroism bullshit, right? That's the question.
Getting some poontang.
I mean, if you live...
But the reward, Rachel, the reward.
But it turns out that that's not even really the thing that motivates people, right? Because there was a study that was done that examined Polish civilians or people in Europe. I don't know if it was limited to Poland. The guy who started it was Polish. But anyways, he wanted to talk to people who helped Jews during the Holocaust. And they wanted to find what was the thing that united them together. It turns out there was not one uniting factor. There was no single motivator. Not religion, not politics, not any one thing they all shared. The reason that they gave, well, outside of this reason, right, that many people gave, is something you hear from heroes to this day. It's just that they couldn't live with themselves if they didn't do anything.
They're compelled to do it because it's just not in their nature not to do anything else. It's just who they are.
Right. And that's really hard to pin down. So they did try to find some trends that kind of backed up that behavior. And those, of course, are not surprising. They saw people with strong values, which that can come from a variety of places like religion or military service. They also found that they tended to have good familial relationships. They weren't beat as children. So
well adjusted.
Correct. Yep. They tended to have a diverse social circle, so maybe they were more open to seeing the humanity in others. And they just had more overall empathy. They said that these folks tended to be people who were gravitated towards a helper job, right? So nurses, doctors, people who take care of others.
Yeah.
Which, again, is that a chicken or the egg? Because if you're a nurse, are you then feeling, because you take, or a doctor, you take the oath to help others, are you then internalize that to help in a moment? And that is where you have a really hard time unpacking, because a more recent study on those recognized by the Carnegie Hero Fund, they find that heroes are more likely to be younger men, which that makes sense. I'm not putting myself in danger. I have kids, it kind of like when you're out there on your own, you could take more risks, right?
100%.
They also tend to be more blue collar or physical type jobs. So they're used to a little bit higher risk of physical safety and more expenditure of that kind of like work. And they also, these situations happen to be in smaller towns. So the book itself argued that that is more social. It's a smaller social network, so they feel more responsible for each other.
Community.
Yes. I also think that there's probably some selection bias for this as well, because these aren't all heroes. This isn't just a index of all heroes. These are the ones that were chosen. So I'm thinking you're probably going to get some selection bias for like stories where the hero fits the narrative of what a hero is, right?
Yeah.
So strong, risk-taking man saves probably child or woman,
Yeah.
Because the other thing was that men are more likely to need saving. So that's why if you're a man and you're doing a high risk activity, you're going to have more chance to be a hero as well as more chance to be a victim, right? Because you're going to be involved in those. Anyways, that's beside the point.
Coin toss.
Really. I mean, it does pose some interesting questions, though, like we've already talked about, around societal expectations and what motivates heroes. While some of those attributes might be born into them, I personally think that social roles and conditioning are probably a big part of it as well.
Little column A, little column B.
That's life. So that's the survival arc, from delay through deliberation to decide. I wish I had better outcomes for the decide portion, but I feel like a lot of that is also broken down through the first part of the journey, that, the practicing is kind of like a deciding decision there too.
If you didn't decide to practice it, you're not going to decide it in the moment.
Correct, right? So there is still a little bit more positive there. And that's why I have to leave it, right? It's just get that muscle memory. And also breathe. That was one thing to help you get out of that fear. I think by now in 2025, we all know about tactical breathing and like breathing to pull ourselves out of fight or flight response. So
did the book say anything about a solid slap in the face? Because that's another film specialty. And I feel like that would work.
I don't think they did. I don't think that came up. But that
Hollywood will have to investigate it.
That's usually shown around panic, though. So
Fair.
If nobody's panicking, maybe not slapping them, but
they're in the middle of trying to decide what to do, and I just show up and slap them.
yeah, just like I needed to get that. That's the rage that you mentioned earlier. My rage is telling me to slap people is the solution as those boat fills with water.
Soup's helpful.
If not now, then when? I ask. But that's the big thing. Get the muscle memory, breathe through those things. There's a lot of ways to prepare yourself for this. We're, again, not a survival. I just wanted to tackle the psychology of it because I thought it was fascinating.
It is, definitely.
If you want to hear more, and also hear more firsthand survivor accounts, because I felt like I was doing a little bit of that, trauma tourism while reading the book. But go check out the book called The Unthinkable by Amanda Ripley. It's really good. There's also, survival stories are everywhere. There's a whole TV show called I Survived, right? It's a fascinating.
I love watching it.
Yeah. It's a fascinating thing. And those people, you can see them in hindsight. I need to watch the show now that I know about the survival arc.
Ooh, yeah.
To see them go through that phases. Like that woman who got her arms cut off by the serial killer. And then
I know who you're talking about, but I've never listened to her. I Survived. Oh, gosh.
Yeah. And she just decided to live. She's like, I'm going to get out of here and I'm going to get that guy to jail. And it was like the resilience really factored in. And she talked about not believing, when her arms were getting cut off, she felt like she was watching a movie. So it'll be interesting to hear about that on the flip side, having this knowledge. But anyways, read the book. There's plenty of places to hear more survival stories and learn more about this. And if you've enjoyed this specific telling of this information, please leave us a rating and review on your podcasting platform of choice. I'm going to let you do the rest.
And we're really covering a variety of topics these days, a little bit of everything, whatever we feel like. So really send us your ideas, send us your curiosities. That's really what we are. It's just a bunch of curious people who like things and like weird things and want to talk about them. So send us your ideas. You just might be next. You can send those by using the link in the show notes to text us. You can also email us at rude@impolitesocietypodcast.com.
That's it for us. Until next time, may your frontal cortex, hypothalamus, and amygdala function in perfect synchrony. Stay curious, our fellow survivors, and keep marching to the beat of your own drum.
Beat of your heart.
Yeah, keep that heart beating, guys.
Your chest. Oh,
don't let the trees get you. Oh, that was just
don't let the trees get you.
Don't let them win. That's the society chats.